can't have as much rights as men, because Christ wasn't a woman. Well, where did your Christ come from? If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, well, these women here together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And they asking to do it. The men better let them.
Perspective. A body of 9 people have reached a decision that will impact over half the US population, 170 million to be exact. But exactly how much control does this body possess? Possession is the key to their game. They interpret, they review, and make decisions about the law that ultimately governs the fate of many people. And not to mention, they can stay in power kind of forever. Sure, folks from the other mighty American branches can check the Supreme Court, but so can the political juggernauts that are the justices, hence the term checks and balances. And hanging in the balance right now are the livelihoods of millions of Americans. But why? Perspective number 2. Like the Supreme Court, you also represent a body, but your ability to interpret, review, and make decisions about your life is no longer being recognized. You see, there's this thing called Roe v. Wade, and it has been overturned in favor of giving states the authority to decide whether or not you get access to reproductive rights. Pro-life or pro-choice. Conservative progression or liberal regression. These are talking points brought up from the left and from the right. But they're missing a key component. Welcome back, everybody. In this video, we'll discuss the legal impacts of Dobbs at the state level. Then, we'll talk about why perspectives matter. Finally, we'll discuss the implications of voting in the context of reproductive rights. Dobbs v. Jackson effectively bans federal rights to abortions. However, depending on where you live, your right to an abortion might still be protected by your state constitution. That's because the US is a federal system. And, as a result, state laws can at times trump federal laws. If you'd like up-to-date information on the status of reproductive rights in your state, then I highly recommend visiting the Center for Reproductive Rights and or the Guttmacher Institute for data and maps on abortion laws by state. This can be very useful given that each state has different and often confusing interpretations of their trigger laws. In Kentucky, for instance, abortion bans went immediately into effect after Dobbs, making the practice a Class D felony with up to 5 years in prison. So, depending on what side of the spectrum you lean on, these bans are either something you vigorously support or vehemently oppose. What's more, engaging in debates about abortion are often extremely unproductive. And according to Jennifer Reynolds, this is one of the biggest challenges that the US faces. In her paper, she frames the topic of abortion around the listening dilemma. At the most basic level, she argues that listening serves as a critical tool for engaging in political topics. Listening, however, often requires 2 behaviors that are almost always at tension: empathy and assertiveness. So, while empathy may enable listeners to view the world through someone else's eyes, assertiveness, on the other hand, requires people to express their own beliefs so that others can understand them. Unfortunately, these behaviors are rarely reciprocated during public or private debates. And voila, the listening dilemma. Now, in the context of reproductive rights, it is very common for people to debate about abortion on the basis of political affiliation, religious ideology, etc., while completely dismissing the actual subject at hand. As a result, we dismiss the perspectives that truly matter, and those are largely from women. It's not just the states. The approach to reproductive rights outside of the US has also proven to be difficult. In a qualitative study conducted in Burkina Faso, informants of 2 villages in the country were asked to discuss their direct or indirect experiences on abortion. A key takeaway from the study demonstrated how women have to constantly manage their public image in the world because of how stagnant conversations on reproductive rights tend to be. Another study conducted in Northern Ireland showcased testimonies of people regarding their educational experience on abortion, indicating that summoning the topic of abortion in a negative connotation can have serious implications in the maturity of girls and women in religious-dominated countries. In Nepal, seeking sexual health services as an adolescent can be an uncomfortable process. More specifically, the authors of the study suggest that women do not disclose information about premarital experiences or abortion because of social desirability bias. In other words, people will respond to questions about their own health in a way that will be viewed positively by others, rather than actually telling the truth. At the most fundamental level, these studies demonstrate that in many places around the world, not only are reproductive rights inaccessible to women, but so are the formative years of a young girl's life. One can put two and two together and suggest that society, which historically has been at the hands of men, attempts to intrude on a woman's bodily autonomy well before the abortion debate even enters the conversation. And this is the listening dilemma at its worst, when an entire half of the world is outright discounted. Now then, what are some things that folks can do to flip this narrative? Well, for starters, we need to be better listeners. Danielle Antagana, a senior at Michigan State, sums this up very succinctly. This statement should encourage us to consider how much value is being placed on a fetus/child vis-a-vis a woman's body. Contraceptives, for instance, can have negative side effects on not just the user, but also for the children that are being given birth to. This then brings up the begging the question fallacy. For those who argue that abortion is immoral, why is that premise not upheld when discussing the mental, physical, and familial tolls that a woman or an entire family unit may experience throughout their lifetime? Back to Danielle's point, in order for there to be fundamental progress, there needs to be fundamental change in our values. And when defining said values, we need to think critically about whose values we're choosing to represent. So, maybe the conversation shouldn't start at whether abortion is right or wrong. Maybe it's about what society has largely undermined, and that's a compassionate approach to women's health. And second, descriptive representation. The simplest path to listening and committing to reproductive rights is through empowering women. Descriptive representation, at its simplest, is when elected officials represent the descriptive characteristics of their demographic/constituents. This phenomena is heavily studied in political science, and if you want to learn more, please consider these scholars for future inquiry. So, in conclusion, we shouldn't discredit the power of voting, nor the long-term implications that descriptive representation can have on political issues like abortion. But while voting is key, we actually achieve more when abortion isn't framed as a political issue, and instead just open our hearts to people, even if it's just a little bit. It's that simple. I hope this perspective was useful, and if you think that I missed anything from this conversation, please consider sharing your thoughts down in the comments. Think big, empower others, and until next time, people.